Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride and I'm joined this evening by Elaine Whyte from the Clyde Fishermen's Association. Elaine, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, Kitty. How are you?
I'm not bad at all. And we are also going to be joined by Sam Paton from the Save Loch Lomond campaign, but she's been a wee bit delayed. She's not been able to get online just yet, but we will be joined by her very soon, we hope. But we start this evening, as we always do, with our coronavirus statistics update. So as of 2 p.m. today, a total of 1,318,262 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK government regional testing centres. Of these, 1,203,896 were confirmed negative, 114,366 were positive. There were 1,316 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Scotland today, and sadly, there were also 43 new reported deaths. Of course, this will be an underestimate of the total number of cases, as not everyone with the virus will show symptoms and not everyone will necessarily get tested. As always, we urge you, if you are showing symptoms of a new, dry, persistent cough, a fever, or a change in your sense of taste or smell, please do book a test as soon as you can. Of the people who have tested positive, there were 1,045 people in hospital last night, 60 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 4,326. This number only includes those who have died in hospital, having received a positive test for the virus. And the latest UK daily figures published today show that 68,307 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 691 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just those in hospitals. And we also have the latest report from the Office for National Statistics, covering deaths registered in England and Wales in the week ending 11th December, which was week 50 of the year. There were 2,756 deaths recorded in week 50, of which 2,530 were in England and 223 were in Wales. This is a slight decrease in England, but a slight increase in Wales. This takes the total number of deaths linked to COVID-19 at the 11th of December to 68,341 in England and 4,115 in Wales. Total excess mortality for the year up to the 11th of December in England is now 13.6% above the 5-year average. In Wales, that number is 11.6%. And before we go on with the rest of tonight's news, if you would like to join the conversation here, you can do so on Twitter by following us at Broadcast Scot and using the hashtag Scotland@7. And as you can see, we'll be flashing some of those tweets up on the screen throughout the show. So do please get in touch if you've got anything you'd like to get off your chest. But our first story tonight, France is expected to reopen its border with the UK, but only to its own nationals, French residents and professionals such as truck drivers, all of whom will have to provide a recent negative COVID test, according to media reports in France. British citizens or other non-French nationals with a permanent residence in France will be able to return, but the border is set to remain closed to all other non-French citizens in the UK, France Info has said. It was not yet clear how long the measures would be in place. The announcement came as the European Commission advised all 27 member states to discontinue bans on flights and trains from the UK and to reopen freight routes to ensure essential supply chains continue to function, including for COVID vaccines. The 48-hour restrictions were brought in on Sunday evening to reduce the spread of the new coronavirus variant, recently discovered in the UK. Now, Elaine, this obviously has affected your members quite significantly. Roughly, do you know how many trucks containing your members' produce are currently sitting somewhere on a motorway in Kent?
Well, we've actually had a few emergency meetings today with SIFA, the national body, so it's quite hard to quantify. You'll see that James Withers of Food and Drink Scotland has been highlighting how much the situation has been underplayed, as there's actually thousands of lorries in around about Kent. So it's a huge situation. I certainly know that a good number of exporters have sent lorries away. There's some with bigger capacity down there as well. So yeah, I mean it's a very worrying situation. Some of these lorries have about worth about 120,000 to 150,000 in terms of cargo, and it's a real concern.
And so, have you had any word from the government? Have they been in touch with you directly to talk about this?
Well, obviously, we have saw that the First Minister has announced that she would wish to see lorry drivers being tested, which is helpful. But no, there are a number of emergency groups that are working on this within government, Food and Drink Scotland, Seafood Scotland, etc. We will be contacting the government today as well. So yeah,
Mhm.
we had an emergency meeting earlier.
Now, we have talked numerous times on the show, as recently as just, was it last week or the week before you were on the show, and we were talking about this possibility in relation to Brexit, if there were, major delays at Dover, how badly that could affect your industry. So, how badly can this affect some of your members now? You talked about the kind of money that might be involved. Is it just this 2 day kind of restriction? Is this likely to put anybody out of business, for example?
Yes, it very well could. We're talking about the Christmas market period. And as you know, we've already explained that mobile fleet, the estimations are that they are down about 50% in their income, and that the creel boats are down at least 30% in their income as well. So that's relying on fresh markets. They would be relying on Christmas as a fallback. Now, some of the fishermen may have been paid, but the exporters will certainly be in quite a bad position at the moment. So yes, I mean, I think again, we've said it before, the inshore communities, the shellfish communities, those exporting to the EU, this is a perfect example of what we worried might happen with Brexit.
Hmm. And so, have you had any contact with the buyers on the other side of the channel? Are they kind of trying to help in any way from their end?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's been a lot of frantic calls between the exporters and the buyers, and some people actually have sister companies in France, etc. They're trying their hardest to think of different routes to the continent. Maybe leaving from different locations. But yeah, it's very very challenging. And we're very aware that other people in the EU will want to see their product. Maybe the Spanish and the Italians, etc. Um, but it's a very challenging position. We have goods that people will want, um, but there's already been a financial loss, a massive financial loss.
Hmm. And I mean, most of the hauliers aren't directly part of your association. But how is this affecting them financially? Are the hauliers being put under a lot of financial pressure by this?
Well, I mean, I can't talk in depth about the horror situation, but I imagine they will be. I mean, and not only for just the seafood sector, there will be a lot of fresh food sectors that are impacted by this. Um, but certainly, I think it's the exporters um, that are most concerned, and also the uncertainty that that's causing. Because a lot of fishermen are saying, should we be going out and fishing? And they just can't give them an answer because they don't know what the situation will be, from the next day onwards. So it's the uncertainty, and I think on top of a very, very difficult year. And nobody wants to complain because we know how difficult this has been for everyone. Um, but these communities are genuinely hanging by a thread.
Yeah, I mean it's been a very difficult year already, obviously, with COVID. Is there any word yet on specific support that's going to be offered to help your members get through this?
Well, that's what the emergency discussion that we had today was about, and how we hopefully work with our government to try and sort out any support that we can for these businesses that are desperately going to need it to survive. They were already in a very poor place.
Mm. Now, I believe we do have Sam Paton with us now. So, Sam, good evening to you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Well, I'm not bad at all, but thank you for joining us. We've just been talking about the hold-ups at Dover specifically and the effect that it's had on some of Elaine's members. What's been your take on what's happened? Do you think this was an overreaction from France, or do you think this is something that we kind of had to expect?
I don't think it is an overreaction from France. At the end of the day, they're doing what's right for them, and and if that means that they need to close the ports, then so be it. But we knew there was going to be some level of this regarding Brexit, never mind the COVID. So the UK government was just not being prepared in any shape or form. But what I've kind of been out and about and been kind of busy today, so bear with me, Kenny. But one of the comments I had seen on Twitter was from a Sky correspondent who took one of the photographs of all the trucks and said anyone for a game of Tetris, which I thought was blatantly rude, because at the end of the day, this is people's livelihoods and this is people's lives, and people are in their trucks and they have got no facilities. And the Salvation Army, I believe, have had to step in and help out some of these truck drivers with food and facilities. But it's just absolutely, they need to come. I don't know what's happened in the last couple of hours in terms of the negotiations, if anything came to pass. So I'm really sorry, Kenny. I'm a bit out of touch for the last few hours. But hopefully there has got to be something, even if it's COVID testing. They've got to get the ports open back up. They've got to get these trucks moving. They've just got to come to some sort of arrangement and negotiation.
Mm. Yeah, well, we will obviously keep watching, especially tonight when that 48 hours ends, and we'll see what happens and report on it more tomorrow. But we do move on a wee bit just now. The European Union is giving a final push in a bid to strike a Brexit trade deal with the UK, its chief negotiator said today, with the two sides inching towards agreement after Downing Street reportedly backed down on its fishing red lines. Brussels sources said the two sides had narrowed their differences on the highly emotive issue of access to fish stocks from 2021, but the issue remained an obstacle to a deal. We are really in a crucial moment. We are giving it a final push, said Michel Barnier, before updating the EU's 27 national envoys and speaking to the European Parliament this afternoon. Responding to reports that the UK government's shift on their fishing red line, the Scottish Fishermen's Federation said if that was the case, then they had broken their promises and betrayed the industry in Scotland. The SNP has said that the UK is heading to a Tory Brexit crisis in just 9 days' time, warning it is now too late to avoid a devastating low deal or no deal Brexit outcome without an emergency extension to the transition period. With a winter wave of coronavirus hitting the UK, unemployment soaring and 1,500 lorries piled up at Kent, Kirsten Oswald MP said any thin deal agreed at this stage would inevitably cause serious and lasting damage to jobs, living standards and the economy at the worst possible time. The SNP Westminster Deputy Leader said the blame would fall on Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer for pressing ahead with an extreme Brexit in the middle of a pandemic, and said independence is now the only way to protect Scotland's place in Europe. So, Sam, I think I'll come to you first on this. We're now, 10 days really away from when everything changes, and we're still seeing no sign of a deal. This rumour that there has been some movement at the moment is still just that. Are you any more confident that there is going to be a deal done?
Kenny, oh crikey, I wish I could say yeah, I was confident and we were going to get a deal done. The EU are trying their hardest, and yeah, we keep getting these rumours that they're close to a deal, but as we've been saying on the show for such a long time, I just don't see it being any sort of deal. I really don't. I hope to be proved wrong, but I honestly don't see it, Kenny. Not at this such late time in the game. I just don't know how they can facilitate it now.
Well, let me turn to you, Elaine. It's the Scottish Fishermen's Federation that said that this would be a betrayal if this fishing red lines that the UK government has put in place are kind of given up. Is that something that your organisation, your members would agree with?
Yeah, we saw the statement earlier today about promises that were made in private. Certainly, we hadn't been privy to any promises that were made in private on these red lines. I think we have said continually, we just want to see something there. And a lot of those issues that we had were around not only maybe some things to do with the common fisheries policy, but also some things to do with domestic policy that we could look to change. Um, we've been very clear. We need to consider the importance of the market. And of course, if there's any access to future fish or additional fish, yes, of course, share that fairly. But we need stability of the markets as well. And it's always been an important factor to us. We've never made any bones about that.
Yeah, and this is something obviously that the fishing has become this kind of totemic issue, and for many people it seems like such a small part of the economy to be such a big deal. Obviously, it's very important to you. Have you got any sense yet that there is going to be something coming down the line in the discussions that you have been having with government? Is there any sign that any kind of hints that they've sent to you that there is something in the works and just to hold tight for another couple of days?
To be honest, no. No, I mean, we've had conversations with the UK government. We obviously are keeping contact with the Scottish government. We just recently saw the release of the Scottish government strategy for future fisheries management, which we feel was a very positive step in terms of how fisheries may go forward and how any additional quota, etc., may be shared fairly if that's the case. But no, we haven't had any indications on the negotiations. And to be fair, you expect to know, I think, at this stage. And you did touch on the fact that it's such a small contributor to the economy, but I think I go back to the fact that a lot of that is to do with how we've managed that and how we may choose to manage it differently. And I think as a country with really strong maritime routes, if you have said before, if you look to Norway, if you look to Iceland, if you look to other countries, I think fishing of our economy and our national.
The time was a real problem because you weren't necessarily going to have a lot of time to prepare for a deal. If a deal was done, today, tomorrow, would you and your members be ready to apply it by Hogmanay?
It really depends what it is. I mean, I guess the problem is that we have always said that the problem is going to be it's going to probably be a practical one in terms of exports. We've said that from the start. We've asked government about, we talked a lot about whether French fishermen were going to blockade our exports. In fact, they maybe didn't have to do that. They maybe just had to, not accept paperwork. And we can see the situation that can have. We're seeing it now. Just by blocking. So I think that's always been, the practical implications has always been a massive concern for us. In terms of would we be able to implement WTO tariffs, etc., the 12.5%, well, I think we're in a very poor position to do so. Without support, I think it would be very, very difficult.
Well, we will obviously keep watching and report to you as soon as we hear any more about that. But we move on now, and Scottish Green MSP Ross Greer has revealed that Scottish Enterprise will ignore overwhelming public opposition and proceed with plans for a flamingo land resort at Loch Lomond. The controversial tourist resort proposals for one of Scotland's most iconic natural beauty spots was refused permission last year after becoming the most unpopular planning application in Scotland's history, following a campaign led by our guest Sam Paton and the Save Loch Lomond group and strongly supported by Ross Greer. The campaign sought to have Flamingo Land's exclusivity agreement on the land cancelled by the Scottish Government. The agreement, which denies anyone but Flamingo Land the opportunity to purchase the publicly owned site, was due to expire at the end of this month, but has now been renewed. Earlier this month, the Green MSP presented a petition signed by 13,000 people asking that it not be renewed. Now, in an email to Greer's office, the government agency confirmed it believes the plan still has considerable merit and that it has renewed its agreement with Flamingo Land, which will result in a new planning application in due course. Greer, who has led parliamentary opposition to the development, has called for the Scottish Government to urgently intervene and prevent renewal of the exclusivity agreement. So Sam, this is obviously something that you have been working on for a long time now, and you said to us when the planning was initially refused that this would happen, that if this exclusivity agreement wasn't removed, that eventually they would just keep coming back and you'd have to mount the same fight over and over again against every new planning application. So how are you feeling today?
I am absolutely fuming, Kenny, to put it mildly, to the fact that they've went and blatantly renewed the exclusivity deal without any due process or due consideration to the local community at Loch Lomond and Balloch and the surrounding areas is just absolutely, totally disrespectful to everyone that lives there and uses the area for work and social reasons. And it's just absolutely mind-boggling. When we started this campaign over 3 years ago, myself and Alana, and then we basically had the Ross County Help Us and the whole community behind us, and that includes the community of Scotland and the community of the world as well, may I add, who we pulled apart the application form, which claimed it was going to bring hundreds of jobs, which on the application form itself, it stated it was bringing very little jobs. They were going to be seasonal, 0-hour contract jobs. There was no regard to the current infrastructure. Anybody that knows Balloch knows that the road system will not and cannot cope with this sort of resort. And the thing is what people forget, or just to remind people that the National Park were on the board of Scottish Enterprise, and they chose Flamingo Land. Now, we still don't know who the other potential developers were. We don't know what their plans were, because what we've always said as part of a campaign, we're not against the right sort of development. We are against Flamingo Land because that is not the right sort of development for our area, and it's not going to bring anything to the area. It's going to take it away, and it's just, it shows total disregard to the local community. It's just, I'm just absolutely fuming. I'm absolutely fuming, Kenny. Mm-hmm. And if anybody wants to help to get this somehow, I don't know how to get this overturned because it's a legal document, the exclusivity deal. We need to kind of look into that, but we need the Scottish Government to step in, because this is the second time that this has been extended. Now, surely, if people don't want it the first time round, they're not going to want it the second time round, and it doesn't matter how many times, it's not going to change people's minds. And with the new world we're in with COVID, it's just absolutely craziness. A holiday resort with adventure rides. How's that going to work in the new world with COVID, even with a vaccine? And it's just, I'm going to end up going into a rant, Kenny, so you're probably better stopping me there, because I am so angry that they have blatantly just went ahead with this.
Well, we wouldn't want to get your blood pressure up too much, Sam, so we will move on just now. Homeware stores and garden centres will close in all level 4 areas from Boxing Day, with the exception of click and collect. Members of the public within level 4 are also being urged to stay close to home where possible to help stop the spread of coronavirus. The stricter definition of essential retailers and the new stay-at-home message have been introduced to help tackle the new variant of the virus, which can spread far more quickly and easily. The changes were announced during a statement to Parliament by First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. She said, "Given the severity of the situation we face and the need to limit interactions as much as possible, we intend to define essential retail more narrowly than we have done recently. In short, that means homeware stores and garden centres will be classed as non-essential and will therefore require to close, with the exception, with the exception of click and collect. So, Elaine, come to you first on this. Does this sound like a good decision from the Scottish Government, given what we know about this new, faster transmitting variant of the coronavirus?
If I'm being honest, the last thing I would want to be at the moment is a politician, because no matter what decision you make, people are not going to be happy. But I think in the interest of safety, I mean, people are dying. So you have to do what's best, and I guess click and collect will work for most people. I do suppose it would be difficult for people who maybe don't have access to online facilities, maybe some of the older generation, and we have to be mindful of that. But there has to be some kind of halting of this current situation for everyone's sake.
Mm-hmm. And Sam, this obviously the new variant is concentrated in Kent and the southeast around London, but obviously we heard today from the First Minister that it has already come into Scotland. There are a number of cases across Scotland already. Do you think this is a sign that we are looking at deeper, stricter measures potentially for quite a while?
I don't know, Kenny. At the end of the day, the thing is with this virus, it's already proven to be, unpredictable. The thing is what's come into play is with the First Minister is she's quite right. I agree with the measures that she's taken. And with the schools and things, I know with my wee one's school, they've been very quick off the mark. The last 2 days, they've been contacting parents about who is going to need their kids to be able to go to school in January, and who is able to keep their kids off until the 18th of January. They are very quick off the mark, getting everything all organised. So the schools are, obviously they've got contingencies in place and they are working on them right now. There's not much we can do. The thing is with the virus, it can mutate. We know the flu virus mutates. It's going to happen, and it's just hoping for the best and kind of getting through it. And yes, it might scarper people's plans and things, but surely the bigger picture is keeping people safe and keeping yourself safe as well. That's the kind of main aspect. And also as well, I know people have already been warning about the schools being off in January, but surely with this new variant, they're still checking how much children are going to be able to transmit this new strain. So they need to be safe, and I would rather they took the extra precautions and and then find out we've done it wrong at the other end. And the people were awfully critical of the Scottish Government at the beginning when we didn't go into lockdown soon enough. So now they're doing it that bit quicker, and that people are still being critical. And you're not going to make everybody happy all the time. It's just doing the best for most people and the most vulnerable in our society. And the rest of us, I don't know about other people's communities, but I know this community, people pretty much got behind each other and supported each other and looked out for each other the first lockdown. And I don't see that changing over the winter months.
Yeah, well, we certainly hope so. We move on now, though, and the SNP has criticised Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer for packing the unelected House of Lords with even more Tory and Labour Party donors, friends and apparatchiks, as 16 new peers were announced today by Downing Street. The list, published this afternoon, includes Tory donor and Vote Leave co-founder Peter Cruddas, who gave the Brexit group £1.5 million ahead of the EU referendum and sat on its board, while Boris Johnson and Michael Gove were on its campaign committee. Mr Cruddas was among the substantial donors to Boris Johnson's Tory leadership campaign, reportedly donating £50,000 and telling reporters, "I'm going to give him some money and back him. I think we need a Brexiteer as our next Prime Minister." The 16 new peers brings the total new appointments for the year up to 52 and will expand the unelected House of Lords to over 830 members, second only to the National People's Congress of China, a nation of 1.4 billion people. Other appointees this year include Boris Johnson's brother, Baroness Ruth Davidson, Brexiteer former MEP Daniel Hannan, and the chair of Keir Starmer's leadership campaign, Jennifer Chapman. So, Elaine, let me come to you first. How are you feeling about the House of Lords and some of these new appointments to it?
To be honest, it's been a busy day for us. So that's the first I've heard of a new appointment. It's difficult to comment. I think I'm sure there's a lot of people who work very hard in those positions, but I think accountability is very important as well. And I think that's probably the best thing I can say.
Well, let me turn to Sam because I'm quite sure she's got a few things to say about this. Sam, these big donors especially, I mean, these are people who have essentially bought their way into a position in the legislature of the country. What do you think that says to the people of the UK?
Politics can be bought, policies can be bought, contracts can be bought. Do you want me to keep going on, Kenny? Basically, the House of Lords is all about who can provide money to the politicians and the government. Not all politicians, and not all. I'm not going to but basically, yeah, it's an institution that should be gotten rid of.
Mm. Well, short and sweet then. We'll move on
yes,
just now. We'll move on just now. And MSPs are today urging the Chancellor to make the £20 universal credit increase permanent and to extend the vital safety net to those on legacy benefits to avoid more people being forced into hardship by the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Keith Brown, MSP, is leading a members' debate at Holyrood today, warning that the uplift has been a lifeline for many people and families over the last few months, and to axe the support next year would punish low-income households, many who are new to universal credit. More than 50 frontline organisations, including the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, have warned of a rising tide of poverty if the UK government goes ahead with its plan to axe the £20 increase in April. So Sam, I'll come to you first on this. This has been a kind of refrain from the SNP for most of the pandemic. It does seem like a strange decision to introduce this during the pandemic and then decide that actually people don't need that extra 20 quid a week once we get to April. Do you think this motion by Keith Brown, this debate here, will have any impact on the DWP in London?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I can't answer that, Kenny. But at the end of the day, how they can turn around and say, come April, people are not going to need that extra £20 is just unthinkable, because at the end of the day, come April, people are still going to be dealing with COVID and the pandemic, and people do need that extra £20. They actually need more than that extra £20, because at the end, as we all know, people are spending, they're spending less money in certain things, but spending more money on, their electricity, their gas, because if you're in lockdown, self-isolation, if you have COVID, that's the kind of things that you need the extra money for. And also as well, if you're in self-isolation or you have COVID and you've actually got COVID and you're asking neighbours and things to go and get you shopping and things like that, most people would be like, asking their neighbours and kind of handing them an extra couple of quid to get themselves something to thank them getting their shopping and things like that. So the 20 quid's not even a lot of money. I mean, what does that 20 quid get you these days anyway? Because the price of food's going up, everything's going up. But it's just, it's one of those ones where it's just typical of the Tory UK government, give you it in one hand and take it away in another. And it's just despicable.
Elaine, let me come to you now. One of the criticisms that the UK government has faced really throughout the pandemic has been this tendency to want to take away support sooner than necessary. That's what happened with the furlough scheme, and we ended up with a last minute change of heart from Rishi Sunak. Do you think there's any chance that come April we might see that same kind of last minute U-turn?
I think we would have to see something like that, to be honest, because I completely agree with Sam. The people who have been most heavily hit by the pandemic, the people who maybe go out and, I mean, I saw it with self-employed fishermen who couldn't go out to work, who had no income at all. And I'm sure it's the same in many sectors. Those people aren't just going to be fine come April. They can't just go to work in their front room with a laptop. And there's so many like that. So I don't think it's sensible in any way to going to take that lifeline off of people, because they're going to need it. They're absolutely going to need it.
Yeah. Well, we move on again now. And seasonal worker plans. The SNP has slammed new UK government plans that would cut Scotland's seasonal workers by thousands at a time when the industry faces an uncertain future. Westminster's seasonal agricultural workers scheme plans would see 30,000 migrant seasonal workers allowed into the UK as a whole next year, even though Scotland alone has more than 10,000 seasonal workers in agriculture. The National Farmers Union Scotland previously demanded the UK government rethink its proposals, calling for 70,000 workers to be allowed to enter the UK each year, as many as the sector typically employs now. The current plans fall very far short of that figure. So, Elaine, I think I'll come to you first. Are seasonal workers a factor in your industry?
Well, actually, we talk quite often with the National Farmers Union, with Scott Walker, about these issues, and I have to support him in as much as farming needs that help. We're all for supporting domestic employment opportunities, and people may be more interested in them in going forward, and that's a good thing, and we have to continue to upskill. But certainly for fishing and farming, you do need new people to come in and just to fill those gaps, because sometimes there hasn't traditionally been the people to do the job. Now, if I look at, for instance, fishing, there's some areas in Argyll and Bute where the population is running about 16%. It's an ageing population too, so they might not have the people available to do the job. And it's the same in areas in, for instance, the north of Norway, where they have similar immigration policies to allow people to come in from Russia and Eastern Europe to help in areas like agriculture and in fishing. So it's very much required, I believe, and I think it depends on the regional needs of the area. And I think a more regional approach is what's certainly required. I believe Minister Foster wished to kind of consider, we put a pause on it, and they said they would go back to the immigration when they had more evidence. But I think the Migratory Committee, the MAP Committee, was pretty further in stating that Scotland potentially had different kinds of agricultural and fisheries needs. So I would see that revisited.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the kind of suggestions has been that these are jobs that are being taken from British workers by these migrant workers, many coming from Eastern Europe. Is that something that you agree with, or is there a pool of British workers you think that are ready to take on these jobs if fewer migrant workers are coming over?
Again, I think it depends on the sector, and it depends on the regional needs. So as I just explained, if you have an area that has huge depopulation and also an ageing population, it might be the case that the workforce just isn't there. And it's particularly the case in rural areas, island communities, etc. And actually, a lot of the people who have come into these communities have only ever added additionality to the region. I mean, we have a lot of Eastern European skippers who have come and got their families and who have done nothing to contribute to the general communities. So I think it really depends on the region, and it really depends on the industry. But certainly there are some areas which really need a workforce. We're all for domestic training, we're all for domestic workers and allowing them to progress. But the shortfalls in some of these regions are too much. And in those instances, why not welcome people who are able to do the job?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sam, let me come to you now. Why do you think UK government doesn't want to welcome these workers?
Well, that's what they based Brexit on, wasn't it? And that's why the Tory government get into won the general election last December, using migrant workers as victims, and try to paint them as being the bad people, stealing our jobs. And yes, there's a certain amount of industries that, as Elaine was saying, they want domestic workers and they encourage domestic workers, and we need domestic workers. But however, there's a lot of industries who fall short, and we need people to come in. And I don't like calling them migrant workers or anything like that. We need people to come in from other areas to do the jobs that we need doing. And the thing is what's going to happen, and what happens when we've seen this year when it came to the farms and things, and they were needing help to pick the crops, and there wasn't enough, feet in the ground, and they had to bring people in. So what's going to happen this year? Are they going to do that again? Are they going to, sit and make this big stance about, we don't want these people coming from foreign lands, which sounds so draconian, to turn round then come the summertime and harvest time to turn and say, but we'll make exceptions for it because of our crops are going to be rotten, and it's just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. It makes no sense whatsoever. And the thing is, what we've got to remember, there's many people from these lands who go to other lands far and wide to work. It's always been the way of the human race, to travel around and work. And to suddenly start putting these draconian measures in place to stop all this process, it's just going to hit. It's going to hit the shops. It's going to hit the consumer. It's going to hit the individual businesses, and that's who it is going to hit. It's not going to benefit us, but it'll be benefiting somebody else.
Yeah, well, we will keep watching that story as well. But we move on now, and Pfizer and Moderna are testing their COVID-19 vaccines against the new fast-spreading variant of the virus that has emerged in the UK. Moderna expects immunity from its vaccine to protect against the variants and is performing more tests in the coming weeks to confirm, the company has said in a statement. Pfizer said it is generating data on how well blood samples from people immunised with its vaccine may be able to neutralise the new strain from the UK, according to the report. The discovery of the new strain sowed a fresh wave of panic in a pandemic that has killed about 1.7 million people and infected more than 77 million people worldwide. The main worry is that the new variant is 40 to 70% more transmissible. Scientists have said there's no evidence to suggest that vaccines will not be effective against the new variant. So Sam, I'll come to you first here. It's good news that there is no evidence that it's not going to be a problem, but obviously they want concrete evidence that these vaccines are going to deal with this variant. What do you make of the way that this new variant has emerged? Hearing it called, for example, the British virus or the English virus now, instead of Donald Trump's Chinese virus. What do you think that does for Britain, particularly at such a difficult time with Brexit and everything?
Oh, crikey. Right, you've made this one kind of hard for me now, Kenny, because there's so much I could say there, but I'm going to behave. The thing is, calling it the English virus, it doesn't do anybody any good to call it the English virus, the British virus, or the Chinese virus, or whatever. At the end of the day, it's COVID, and that's what it's called. Obviously, this strain is slightly, has mutated and is different, and I believe it's got another 17 strains as well. And I think it's called, is it B1.1.7? I see, I've been doing a bit of studying this morning. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's very worrying and it's concerning, and the scientists, the researchers and the governments have just got to dot the I's and cross the T's and make sure that the vaccines are going to keep on working. At least we know that they work with the current strain, and they just need to double check. At the end of the day, we'd be critical if they didn't do it, if they didn't double check. But yeah, it's, what can you say? I mean, at the end of the day, I'm sure if it had originated up here in Scotland, it would be getting called the Scottish virus and whatever, you know. But I think we need to refrain from calling it the English virus. I think that kind of takes us into, you know, political territory. We try not to do, be a bit adult about it and just carry on calling it the COVID virus. But
Absolutely.
however, the thing is we need to be very careful when we're out and about. And I know that last week I had met people who were coming up from down south to Scotland, who were coming up here on holiday and recreation purposes, which is really concerning. And that's what concerns me more than anything, is the fact that people are not taking this seriously enough. They're taking it as a bit of a joke, and not realising they're putting other people at risk.
Now, I'll come to you now, Elaine. We've seen, obviously, the Pfizer vaccine has started to be rolled out in the UK. We've seen some number of people have already got it. The Moderna vaccine is now being rolled out in the US. Do you think, as Sam kind of was hinting at there, that the emergence of these vaccines has caused people to maybe relax a wee bit more than they should have done?
It's difficult because I mean, I guess anybody who's living or has just come out of tier 4 will be back into it. They maybe haven't been relaxed. But no, I don't think anyone should be relaxing. But I think Sam's right. I think it comes down to your individual approach to things, and you just have to keep bearing in mind that even if you don't value your own safety, you have to value the safety of those around about you who might not be in a similarly beneficial position in terms of age or anything like that. You know, and I completely agree. It's not helpful to call it from a certain region, etc. There's going to, I would imagine, there'll continue to be different variants, and I'm sure it's not just in England or wherever they find it. I'm sure it's on the continent too. That's the nature of diseases.
Yeah. Now, just before we do move on, the EU continuity bill, which was being debated at Holyrood today, has just passed. That debate went quite a bit longer than we expected, but it has passed by 90 votes to 29. So I'm guessing that probably means everybody except the Tories voted for it. But we move on a wee bit just now. And people living with dementia and their carers will have increased access to respite and community services and post-diagnostic care under new plans. The Dementia and COVID-19 National Action Plan outlines steps to build on the action taken since March to ease the impact that the coronavirus pandemic has had on people with dementia and their carers. Unpaid carers of loved ones with dementia will have access to Scottish Government-funded NHS mental health services and counselling support available through Alzheimer's Scotland. As well as continuing to support frontline services and staff, dementia care will be enhanced in acute and associated care settings through a further Dementia Champions programme. This plan complements and supports priority support to the care home sector during the pandemic. So Sam, I'll come to you first on this. We have an ageing population, and dementia is likely to become a bigger factor in our lives for the foreseeable future. What do you make of this announcement of new support for dementia patients and their carers announced by the Scottish Government today?
It will be very welcomed, and it is very overdue. It was needed even before COVID, but that's one of the kind of, if you can see the bright side of COVID, that it is, you know, it's allowing these things to come more out in the open. What's been missing. I know a few people who care for partners with dementia, and it's a 24-hour job, 7 days a week. They don't get a day off. They don't even get proper sleep. At the moment, yes, they may have a care worker going in for 15 minutes over certain times of the day to help out, but that's pretty much it. That's the support they get, and it's not a lot. It really isn't a lot. And how these people, these carers, cope with that mentally is just, I don't know. I don't know how they cope. The people that I'm thinking of have always got a smile on their face, and they always seem to be able to cope. And I just take my hats off to them. They're my heroes, so to speak. What they do is amazing. They don't complain. They just, care for their spouse with unconditional love, and they do need support. They do need help, and any bit of help and support, for whether it's for more services to go in and give them a bit of respite, or for even just somebody to go in and have a blather with them, and just make a cup of tea, sit down and have a cup of tea, would make all the difference. It really, really would. So yeah, it is welcomed.
Yeah, Elaine, I mean, that point Sam makes about just having somebody you can talk to, and that's part of this plan. That's hugely valuable to people who are often quite isolated, doing that really difficult job of caring for a relative, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a carer myself, and yes, I think COVID has probably shown a light that a lot of these people that Sam was talking about that look after their relatives, potentially their only help is relying on their own relatives who potentially can't see them now or can't give them a hand that they would normally have. So I think it's a lot to have to ask people to rely on friends and family, and in times when they can't rely on friends and family, it shows the importance of having a framework um, that people can fall back on, because nobody should really have to live their life asking for favours. And I think it's in a developed and evolved society, we should have frameworks to stop people from taking it all on their own shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely. We are just going to move now. I've just been handed a statement from the Scottish Government regarding the EU Continuity Bill. Powers to allow alignment between devolved Scots and EU law as a result of Brexit. New powers and measures to align devolved Scottish law with European Union legislation after the end of the Brexit transition period have been backed by MSPs. The UK withdrawal from the European Union Continuity Scotland Bill, which just passed its final stage in the Parliament, will help Scotland to continue to benefit from high European standards. The bill focuses on three key areas following the end of the transition period: a discretionary power to enable Scottish ministers to align devolved Scots law with EU legislation, provisions to ensure continuation of guiding principles on the environment in Scotland, and establishment of the new oversight body Environmental Standards Scotland to replace the system of environmental governance provided by the institutions of the EU. Now, Elaine, I'll come to you first on this quickly. Obviously, this bill has been in the works for some time. To get it finally passed now, obviously, will be good news for the Scottish Government. Do you welcome this possibility for the Scottish Government to essentially shadow EU regulations into the future?
I think it could be a good thing in some areas, and I think as well, I have saw some people concerned that means that they will copy some of the CFP, and of course the Scottish Government hasn't always been supportive of some of the CFP policies. So, it really depends on the legislative area that we're talking about, but I can understand why they are doing it. But it really will depend on the legislative area that we're addressing, and I think in some occasions we may wish to think about how we want to do things ourselves as well, but legislation it makes no it would be sensible to broadly follow the principles that have worked. Yeah. Being in mind, we may wish to have some flexibility in those that we feel we could improve on.
Mm-hmm. And Sam, clearly, the Scotland, of course, is getting dragged out of the EU, getting dragged away from these things. Do you think this makes sense for the Scottish Government to kind of track EU changes, track the way that the EU progresses until such times as perhaps Scotland can achieve its own EU membership?
I completely agree with Elaine and saying about, kind of following it broadly. The end of the day, for us to rejoin the EU, that's a decision that's got to be taken, once we have independence. Because at the end of the day, we've got to kind of follow the democratic will of the people. But at the moment, there's regarding the EU, there's good things and bad things. We all know that. So even to use it as a marker or use it, as a stepping stone, because Scotland's already proved with certain things that we can be progressive and we've got our own ideas about how we want to run as a country. So to follow it broadly, use it as a stepping stone. And it all depends on what it's going to be. And, as I say, as Elaine was saying as well, there's good sides and bad sides to it, and it all depends on the legislations.
Mm. Well, that is our final story for tonight. We did have one more story, but we don't have time to talk about that now. So thank you very much to Elaine Whyte and to Sam Paton for joining us this evening. It's always a pleasure to speak to both of them. And thank you to you at home for joining us as well. It's always a pleasure to do these shows for you, and it wouldn't be worth doing them if you weren't here. So thank you very much for sharing your time with us. If you're able to support Broadcasting Scotland, we would ask you if you please do go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register, sign up there as a supporter, and your £5 a month is what keeps the lights on here at Broadcasting Scotland. It's what lets us keep producing these shows for you. And we really do need as much money coming in as we can in order to be able to keep developing. As many of you will know, we are running a crowdfunder just now as well to try and raise enough money to employ some people, particularly if 2021 is going to be the big news year that we believe it may be. If you want to just make a one-off donation to that, then you can go to broadcastingscotland.scot/donate. If you're not able to support us financially, we absolutely understand. The shows will always be free to view online, so don't ever fear that we're going to cut you off. But you can still make a huge difference for us by following us on social media at Twitter on Twitter at Broadcast Scot. You can like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find us on the Amazon Fire Stick. And then please do share these shows around with your friends, your family, the dogs in the street. Let them know what Broadcasting Scotland is, what we do, and why you think they should give us a try as well. That's much the best way for us to grow our audience. So do please let people know where you get your news from. And finally, I've mentioned employees, but we are also looking for volunteers throughout the country to help us through next year, particularly when it comes to covering the election. We want to have people at every count if we possibly can. So if you're interested in getting involved with that or any other aspect of producing TV here in Scotland, then please do get in touch with us. We have lots of opportunities. We can offer training and support for people all over the country. So wherever you are, if you're interested, please do get in touch. That is all we have time for tonight, though. So thank you once again to our guests, Elaine Whyte and Sam Paton. Thank you to you again for joining us. I'll be back again tomorrow at 7 with another Scotland at 7. But until then, thanks again and have a great evening. Good night.
The Catalans, the Basques, the Galicians in the Basque.
An independent future for Scotland.
How quickly do you think a referendum can be arranged?
Best practice demands that it should be 6 months.
Just looking at the overall share numbers for Scotland at the moment, the SNP 46.4%.